I want to share with you the most incredible story about the Holy Tzaddik Baba Sali that I'm certain you've never heard before. And it's the story behind one of the most famous stories involving Baba Sali. The Holy Tzaddik Baba Sali, Rav Yisrael Abuchatzir Zatzal, who throughout the world people used to travel to Netivot to receive his bracha. And to this day, on the day of his Yortzeit, his Hilula, which this year comes out this Sunday, tens of thousands of people from around the world come to davened at his kever. The story I'm about to say has been published in many, many books, and it's perhaps the most famous story about Baba Sali. However, there are many versions to it. So I verified this. We verified it by speaking to the Rabbanit Sime Abuchatzir, Baba Sali's wife, who was alive and well in Netivot, as well as another woman who was there when the story took place. But then, what I'm going to share that happened after the story, or rather before, is truly mind-blowing. This is the story. There was a Yid from the city of Rishon LeZion that had a problem. He had an infection in his legs, and he was scheduled, unfortunately, for an amputation. And he came to Baba Sali after Baba Sali stopped accepting people for that day. It was in the afternoon. And he arrived in a wheelchair, but he decided he wanted to go up himself. So he crawled on all fours up the steps to Baba Sali's home. And he arrived next to the tzaddik, and the tzaddik motioned him he should sit in a chair. This Yid, with his energy, he was able to. He sat down in the chair, he pulled himself up. Baba Sali asked him what's wrong, and he got very emotional. He started to cry, and he said his story of how he was scheduled, unfortunately, for an amputation the next day, and he came for a bracha. So Baba Sali used to communicate through his Gabbai Rav Alfasi, and Rav Alfasi told the Yid what Baba Sali asked him. He repeated information back to him. Baba Sali took some arak, which is very famous, Baba Sali, the Abuchatzir family, and he poured the l'chaim for the Yid, and then he told Rav Alfasi to tell this gentleman to stand up. So Rav Alfasi, Tzaddik said, he said over to this person, Tzaddik said you should stand up. So he said, tell him that I'm paralyzed, I can't move, my legs don't work. So he repeated this to Baba Sali, and once again Baba Sali said, tell him I said he should stand up. And once again, the same thing happened. He said again, I can't move. After a few times, Baba Sali raised his voice slightly and said, tell him that I said he should stand up. And finally the person, I guess, took it seriously and started to feel something. And suddenly, he stood up. And the sheer shock of the moment, he didn't know what hit him. He said, what's happening to me? I can walk, I can feel my legs. And he ran out of Baba Sali's home. And he ran down the road towards Yeshivat HaNegev in Netivot. And he burst into the Beis Medrash. It's a famous story. And he said, what happened to him? The tzaddik healed my legs. What's happening to me? He was kind of losing it. And they told him, wait, why'd you run out of the tzaddik's house? He's probably waiting for you. So Jet went back to Baba Sali's home, sat down in a chair. And Baba Sali asked him a few questions. He said, tell me, do you keep Shabbos? Do you keep kosher? Do you put on tefillin? And the gentleman admitted that no, he didn't do any of these things. So the tzaddik told him, look, if you accept upon yourself and work upon yourself to accept Shabbos, kosher, kashrus, then Mitzvah Hashem, you'll be healthy the rest of your life. And so it was. He gave him a bracha, and this Yid became healthy and was able to walk, and it was a miracle. It was a nes. And this story spread like wildfire. It was all over Israeli news. It was covered by Israeli media. It was in the newspapers. There were pictures. There were celebrations. It's a famous story to this day. But this is the actual details of the story that's verified by Baba Sali's wife herself. Now, I called up my uncle, Rav Dovlev, who's Rosh Yeshiva in Schar Sacher, which is the new name of Yeshivat HaNegev, where this gentleman went. And I asked him, do you know anything more about the story? So he says, yeah. You mean the story with Rav Shlomo Miller? I'm like, Shlomo Miller? What are you talking about? Listen to this story behind the story. There was a Yid by the name of Rav Shlomo Miller who lived in Netivot. And he was a special person. He liked to do chesed. And one of the unique chesed that he liked to do was go to hospitals and visit Jews who unfortunately didn't have friends or family to visit them. And he would encourage them and give them chizuk and be with them and be their friend, because they were, so to speak, in isolation, which everyone can relate to today. And it came the day that he was in a hospital in Rishon LeZion, and he met this Yid who was lying there, totally depressed, sad, down. He asked him, tell me your story. And he said, unfortunately, he had a problem with his legs, an infection, and he was scheduled for an amputation the next day. So Rav Miller told him, look, I live in Netivot. There's a big tzaddik by the name of Baba Sali. Why don't you let me take you there and get a bracha? He said, what do you mean? What tzaddik? What bracha? Nothing. He wasn't such a believer. He said, Miller said, look, what do you have to lose? Tomorrow you're scheduled for an operation. It's very, very scary. So he said, no, please. He totally had given up on himself, on hope, and life. Miller said, look, I know Baba Sali. People come from around the world for him. I can get you in. Let's go. He was able to convince him. They checked themselves out of the hospital. They got permission. They had to come back the next day. Brought him in a wheelchair to the tzaddik Baba Sali. But Miller brought him there, and then the guy wanted to crawl himself. And then the story took place as you heard before. Think about that. This Yid Rav Miller, because he cared about another Jew, he didn't know this person. He wasn't particularly friendly with him. He just met him. But he cared about him so much that he convinced him to come take him to the tzaddik, and that's how he literally saved his life, both spiritually and physically. You know, this year, with the yurtzeit, the Hilula of Baba Sali, so many people want to have their tefillas take place at the tzaddik. Yad La'achim, the organization, has arranged that whoever wants to submit their names for davening at his kever for absolutely free can do so through Yad La'achim. Baba Sali was very close with Yad La'achim. He encouraged the organization. He used to give even donations, and he wrote a special letter in which he wrote that whoever supports Yad La'achim will be Zoicha to Birchas Kol Tov, basically a bracha of all Yeshuas. So just like Rav Miller cared about his friend, so too we should. Everyone knows someone who needs something, whether it's a shidduch, parnasa, fortunately health now, which is so rampant, everyone knows someone who is suffering. Every Yeshua, everything you need, you can call Yad La'achim or go to the website at yadl.org. And like I said, there's no minimum donation required. If you want to give some tzedakah, that's fine, but there's no minimum donation required. There never has, there never will be. yadl.org or call 1-866-923-5224. 866-923-5224. So I urge everyone on this special day, the Hilula, the yurtzeit of the holy tzaddik, the Baba Sali, who literally had thousands of people seeing their tefillas answered through him. The special tefillah that will take place at his kever, through the Talmidei Chachamim, including grandchildren of the Baba Sali himself, big tzaddikim, Roshei Kollel. This is the time. yadl.org, yadl.org. Let's daven for one another. Let's give our names for those who need help. And with the schus of the big tzaddik, let's daven for each other. Let all our tefillas be answered.